The jungle of Luzon Island in the Philippines is far more than a simple gathering of trees and vines. It is a suffocating emerald sea that blankets the mountains of the central archipelago. This is a realm where sunlight battles desperately to reach the forest floor, where humidity clings to the air like a sodden, oppressive curtain that crushes the lungs of any soul reckless enough to traverse its depths. The landscape pulses with life and sound. Millions of cicadas create a deafening chorus. Exotic tropical birds such as the kalau pierce the air with their distinctive honking calls, and monitor lizards rustle endlessly through decomposing undergrowth, weaving together an unrelenting symphony of chaos. To outsiders, especially those from the West, this wilderness represents pure pandemonium and terror, a verdant inferno where danger lurks behind every leaf. Yet to those who dwell within its embrace, this jungle is sanctuary. It is their fortress. It is the only refuge they have ever trusted. The year is 1952. While the world grapples with the tensions of the Cold War, here in this dense green labyrinth, conflict burns hot and violent. A patrol of rebel fighters moves through the consuming darkness. These are soldiers of the Hukbalahap Army, communist guerrillas who bear little resemblance to the uniformed troops depicted in World War II newsreels. Their garments are tattered remnants stolen from farmers or salvaged from corpses. They navigate in makeshift sandals fashioned from discarded automobile tires or march completely barefoot, the soles of their feet hardened to leather-like toughness. They clutch Japanese Arisaka rifles corroded by relentless moisture, and American carbines pillaged from constabulary outposts. These are gaunt, hardened men whose faces carry the deep etchings of prolonged hunger and unwavering determination. They have endured the savage Japanese occupation throughout the 1940s and now wage a fierce insurgency against their own government. Their knowledge of these pathways surpasses that of anyone else. They understand precisely which routes will ensnare a man stumbling through darkness and which bird cries signal the approach of intruders. They mock the government forces, dismissing them as pampered city dwellers, terrified of nightfall, who require motorized vehicles to transport their equipment. The Huks move like phantoms through the undergrowth. They can traverse 50 kilometers sustained by nothing more than a meager portion of rice. They are absolute masters of this unforgiving terrain. But on this particular night, anxiety grips the rebels. The confidence that typically characterizes their movements has evaporated. They fear neither the Philippine constabulary, that despised police apparatus, nor bullets, mortars, or even the napalm recently supplied by American forces. Their dread centers on something that cannot be confronted with conventional weapons. They fear something primordial and ancient. Whispers have reached them from villagers inhabiting the valley below. The elderly women who gather in the marketplace, ordinarily dependable sources for intelligence regarding troop deployments and supply movements, have begun speaking of entirely different matters. They converse in hushed, terrified murmurs, their eyes darting nervously to ensure no eavesdroppers lurk nearby. They speak of an ancient malevolence that has returned to Mount Arayat. They speak of the Aswang. In Philippine mythology, the Aswang embodies pure, primal nightmare. This is no romanticized vampire from Hollywood cinema. This is no aristocratic count draped in elegant capes. The Aswang is a shape-shifting abomination of grotesque and insatiable hunger. During daylight hours, it may masquerade as an ordinary human being, perhaps a reclusive neighbor or a timid shopkeeper who avoids direct eye contact and resides at the village periphery. But when darkness falls, transformation occurs. It can assume the form of an enormous bat, a massive blackbird, or a monstrous hound with eyes burning crimson. It possesses an elongated proboscis reminiscent of a mosquito, but constructed of flesh, which it employs to penetrate bamboo dwellings while inhabitants slumber. It feeds upon unborn children, extracting them from the wombs of pregnant women using its hollow tongue. It stalks the infirm, the vulnerable, and the solitary. Most horrifying for these jungle fighters, it drains the blood from living victims, leaving behind desiccated, pallid husks. The rebel commander, a grizzled veteran who has survived 100 firefights and bears the name Cadgo, orders his troops to maintain their advance. He hisses commands for silence. Striking a match to ignite a cigarette, he observes the unmistakable fear reflected in their eyes. He insists that the Aswang is merely a children's fable, a tale recounted by grandmothers to prevent youngsters from wandering into the forest after dark. He demands they concentrate on their objective. They are traversing a narrow ridgeline, positioning themselves to ambush a government convoy at daybreak on the highway far below. The vegetation grows so densely that moonlight cannot penetrate at all. The sole illumination emanates from the faint bioluminescent shimmer of decomposing fungi scattered across the jungle floor, casting an eerie greenish glow that provides minimal comfort. The patrol advances in single-file formation, standard military protocol designed to minimize audible disturbance and leave minimal traces for government trackers to follow. The final man in the column is a young fighter named Mateo. He has lived only 19 years. He joined the rebellion after witnessing his father beaten to death by thugs employed by wealthy landlords, murdered simply for requesting a larger portion of the harvest. Mateo displays courage during combat engagements. He has taken lives before. Yet tonight tremors rack his body. He repeatedly glances backward. The jungle atmosphere feels fundamentally altered this evening. The air seems unnaturally cold. He senses invisible eyes observing him from the canopy overhead. He grips his rifle with such intensity that his knuckles bleach white, the wooden stock slick with perspiration. Suddenly, vegetation rustles nearby. This is not wind. The air remains perfectly motionless, stagnant, and oppressive. This is a sharp, intentional disturbance, like a dried branch fracturing beneath substantial weight. The soldier ahead of Mateo continues forward, oblivious, focused entirely on the comrade in front of him. Mateo halts. He pivots to investigate. He strains his vision against the overwhelming blackness. He perceives nothing except tangled masses of vines and ferns. He attempts to convince himself it is merely a wild boar or a monkey. Then the smell reaches him. A peculiar, musky odor. Not the scent of any animal, but something archaic and wrong. In one explosive instant, powerful gloved hands seize him from the darkness. He has no opportunity to scream. A palm clamps across his mouth, muffling his cry, reducing it to a strangled gurgle. He is dragged silently and brutally into the undergrowth. The jungle consumes him entirely. Foliage closes behind him as though he never existed at all. The remainder of the patrol continues their march. They detect nothing over the constant drone of insects. They advance for another 10 minutes, covering approximately half a kilometer before the second-to-last man turns to whisper to his companion, requesting water. He sees nothing but vacant space. He halts the column. He signals the others. They hiss inquiries into the darkness. They call the name of their missing comrade. Mateo. Mateo. No response comes. Only the buzzing of cicadas and the distant, mournful cry of a nocturnal bird. The silence that descends feels heavier than the tropical heat. Terror begins infiltrating their consciousness like icy poison. It originates in the stomach and radiates outward into the limbs. They reverse course. They search the trail, sweeping flashlight beams nervously, the illumination slicing through mist. Several hundred yards back, they discover him. Mateo lies upon the path. He is dead. But this is not the death of warfare. No bullet has struck him. No bayonet has pierced his flesh. His skin displays a pale white pallor, drained of every trace of color, resembling marble in the moonlight. His eyes remain wide open, frozen in an expression of absolute terror, staring upward at the canopy as though he witnessed something unspeakable in his final moments. Upon his neck, directly over the jugular vein, 2 puncture marks are visible, 2 circular, clean perforations perfectly spaced. No blood stains the ground. No blood marks his clothing. It appears as though he has been consumed completely, drunk dry. The rebel soldiers stare at the corpse. They cross themselves instinctively, reverting to the Catholicism of their childhoods. They do not search for enemy footprints. They do not seek spent shell casings. They look skyward. They observe the dark silhouettes of bats circling above the trees. Commander Cadgo attempts to maintain order, but his voice trembles. The political officer, who typically reads passages from communist manifestos, attempts to speak, but words fail him completely. The men understand what has occurred. This is not the Philippine Army. This is not American intervention. This is the Aswang. The monster is real, and it is hunting them. By the following morning, the entire squadron has abandoned the region. They refuse to continue fighting on that cursed mountain. They retreat to the lowlands, surrendering their stronghold in strategic advantage. They inform other squadrons of what they witnessed. Fear propagates like contagion. The Philippine government secures the territory without discharging a single round. Thousands of miles distant in a nondescript office in Washington, a report arrives upon a heavy oak desk. It details the operation's success. The vampire has attacked. The enemy has fled. The man who orchestrated this elaborate deception was neither wizard nor priest. He was no monster hunter. He was an American intelligence operative named Edward Lansdale, a former advertising executive from California, who recognized that the most potent weapon in warfare is not firearms or explosives. It is narrative. It is story. This is the account of Operation Vampire, the chronicle of how intelligence agencies weaponized folklore, how the United States mastered fighting unconventional wars in shadows using ghosts, demons, and superstition to shatter enemy morale. This is also the story of a moral boundary crossed deep in the Philippine jungles, a line that would eventually lead directly to the tragedy unfolding in Vietnam. To comprehend why intelligence operatives were staging vampire attacks throughout the 1950s, we must understand the world Edward Lansdale inhabited. We must return to the ashes remaining after World War II and examine the turbulent, violent history of the Philippines. The Philippines had existed as an American colony for nearly half a century. The United States had purchased these islands from Spain in 1898 for $20 million, treating them as mere property. Their colonial rule has been described as 300 years confined in a Catholic convent, followed by 50 years immersed in Hollywood culture. Americans introduced public education systems, baseball, jazz music, and automobiles, but they also entrenched the power of wealthy landowning dynasties, creating a society where a minuscule elite controlled the land while millions of peasants labored in conditions approaching slavery. This profound inequality became the fuel that would eventually ignite nationwide rebellion.